Hello, digital world. Welcome back once again to Spliced In Later. We are happy to have you here once again to listen to me rabbit on for who knows how long about whatever comes into my head. Normally to do with movies, TV shows, the film world. You get the gist by now. And as I promised, I wanted to come here today to bring you a top 10 list. I haven't done that for a while. And when I say I haven't done it for a while, a couple of weeks maybe, top 10 lists are always fun. And it's always fun to have people completely disagree with you and say those things are wrong. This list makes me particularly anxious because I know people will have strong opinions about this. But I'm powering through as I said I would. Today we are doing the top 10 Pixar movies. Now the reason I'm bringing this list to you now is because this year, 2020, we have two new Pixar movies coming out this year. We have Onward around March, April, and Soul in July. Two brand new Pixar movies that aren't sequels or prequels to previous established Pixar content. New ideas, new concepts, new range of emotions that I'm sure we'll all feel when we see these movies. And that's what I love about Pixar movies. They are a high level for animation. 9 times out of 10, they are probably the best animated film to come out for whatever year they are released. They're guaranteed to have some serious messages to deliver to you. They're guaranteed to get your emotions in the positive or the negative, depending on the story. Guaranteed for some fantastic humor, great characters, and just incredible animation. Pixar broke the mold, one could argue, when they first came out back in 1996 with the first Toy Story. And they've just been getting better and better. In many cases, other studios are just scrambling to keep up. So good on you, Pixar. Here's my tribute to you in anticipation for Onward and Soul. Who knows? At the end of this year, maybe they will have stolen some spots in the top 10 Pixar list. Who can say? That's what's exciting about movies. You never know until you see them. These things just keep coming. There never will not be movies to see. So here we go. Now, for the top 10 Pixar movies, I have to say right out the bat, as I do with most of my top 10 countdowns, this is a completely biased list. These are the movies, the Pixar movies, that are my favorite for very biased reasons. There will be Pixar movies that are not included on the top 10 that are considered to be the best movies of all time. And I would not argue with that. I will absolutely concur that some of these Pixar movies that won Academy Awards aren't going to be very high on my list, if they're even on there at all. Not because I don't think they're good, but because these other movies have a special place in my heart, and it's normally to do with the fact that I grew up on Pixar movies. Most of the movies that are on this list, I watched over and over again as a kid. I saw them in the movie theater with my parents, my friends. So if you think you can assume which movies are going to be high on this list, oh boy, I'm about to completely prove you wrong, especially with my very first entry on this list. So, enough dilly-dallying. Coming in at number 10, I told you this was my list, Cars 3. Please don't turn off your Spotify. Please do not flip off your computers. Stick with me. Let me explain, please. Please, there's a reason why Cars 3 is number 10 on this list. I will agree with the common belief that the Cars movies in the Pixar world are generally not top form when it comes to the other Pixar films. One could argue that they might be the bottom tier. And I'm not going to say all the Cars films are great. That said, I like Cars 1. I think Cars 1 is good for what it does. And I think it very clearly knows that it's not out there to win some Academy Awards. And it's not out there to wreck our emotions and break the mold in messages. Same with Cars 2. Cars 2 is just a silly movie. But it knows it. It knows it. It's not sitting there going, Cars 2 is the greatest animated movie and here's why. The Cars movies were made for kids to buy toys. And as a kid, I bought the toys. So well done, Pixar. You fooled me. And I will say, having been to Disneyland in Los Angeles, Radiator Springs, based on the Cars movies, is a very cool place to see, especially at night when all the lights are on. They've got some great rides, some great food to eat. So whatever. If Cars exists solely for me to experience that at Disneyland, I'm happy. But no, Cars 3 is number 10 on this list because it was incredible in the message that it portrayed in its entry. It was a very serious movie. A lot of the trailers came out and showed Lightning McQueen, the main car of our story, having a terrible car accident And boy, does he have a terrible car accident in this movie. He's wrecked while trying to compete with a reflection of what our world is sort of becoming in terms of relying on technology. Keeping up with the young crowd. Lightning McQueen is not a young car, I guess. I don't know how cars aging works, but it's very clear in the movie that he is an older car compared to the younger cars that are out there trying to steal his fame and his thunder. What's great about Cars 3 is when he has his accident, you would naturally assume this is going to be a Rocky sense, like Rocky 3. Lightning's going to crawl his way back to the top, win the race, and become famous again. That's not really what this movie is about. What it's about is Lightning McQueen coming to terms with the fact that he was great, but he never will be great again, and it is time for him to accept that. That doesn't make him any less a car, that doesn't make him any less a person in the eyes of his friends and his family, but he needs to accept it, which is a very strong, powerful theme for, as people would argue, a kids' movie. I think it stuck to its very serious themes very greatly. I thought the characters were very true to themselves, specifically Lightning McQueen. As he does try and train and get back on top, he makes some new friends, he meets a rookie car, and it's him realizing that she suffers from the same issues that he has, and it's coming together and helping each other overcome their own faults. With Lightning, it's accepting who he is, and that's okay. With his new friend, it's accepting that she could be better if she just believes in herself. The ending is great. It has a cool twist ending, which I didn't see coming. Maybe I'm not that smart, but I really liked it. They were brave enough to go with that ending. Of course, being Cars, the humor was there. There was still lots to laugh at, but overall, I was very surprised and happy that they stuck with that serious route they promised in the trailers. Compared to Cars 1 and 2, Cars 3 does not deserve to be lumped in with those films as the bottom tiers of Pixar films. It's a fantastic film, great emotions, great characters, and I thought long and hard about it and went, yes, Cars 3 deserves to be on this list at number 10. Coming in at number 9, obvious one, Toy Story, the original, the one that started it all. Toy Story is very dear to my heart. Obviously, I watched it a lot as a kid. Broke the mold in terms of animation. Pixar really came out and showed the world, look what we can do. Sure, compared to animation these days, if you go back and watch Toy Story, one could argue that it hasn't aged well. I agree and disagree. I don't think the animation needs to look overall impressive. It still hammers home the story quite well, but I will agree that when you've seen Woody and Buzz in later installments, seeing their kind of blank, emotionless faces that look like they could murder you in your sleep is a little terrifying, but also what makes it charming, I think. I never noticed that when I was a kid, and if I look past it now, it's not that much of an issue. It's more a fun extra tidbit to Toy Story. Woody and Buzz are great. They are cherished to most people, I think, who remember watching animated films as a kid. They are so different, and they are so brought to life by the voice actors who portray them. Tom Hanks is Woody. No one else could be him in the same way that Tim Allen is Buzz Lightyear. And their contrasting views of the world made for hilarious comedy back and forth. One could see maybe Woody was losing his grip on sanity during this film, which is both hilarious and terrifying to watch. But that scene in Toy Story where Buzz obviously comes to terms with the fact that he is in fact a toy and not a space ranger, played to Randy Newman's I Will Go Sailing No More, absolutely devastating, and it's still one of the most emotional scenes I've ever seen in a movie ever. Toy Story brought to life a whole new world as well. It gave all these different toys different personalities, and what's great is that these were toys that did exist in society. People had Mr. Potato Heads, they had Slinkies, they had toy dinosaurs, they had army men. It's cool. You could play with these toys and pretend you're playing Toy Story. Using these established trades made it very easy to believe that the world that you were witnessing existed. Toy Story would be a lot higher on this list if it weren't for improving animation and just Pixar stepping up their game in terms of emotions with every new film that they make. But it would be an absolute outrage if Toy Story was not on this list, because without Toy Story, we would not have Pixar films. So Toy Story, number 9. Number 8, I think a lot of people will agree that this is a fantastic film. A lot of people loved it. It was a big buzz when it came out only a few years ago. Inside Out. Inside Out was an emotional train wreck for anyone who watched it. I mean, it was a movie about emotions. The emotions in your head. Joy, sadness, anger. The main emotions that we follow in this movie are obviously joy and sadness because they are such conflicts to each other. In the same way that Woody and Buzz are conflicts to each other. It's a very cool, vibrant world that they make up just inside a little girl's head as she struggles with moving to a new house, dealing with puberty, with shithead friends, parents that don't quite understand how she's feeling. For someone who went through that not too long before the movie started, I understood completely how she was feeling, and the way that they bring these emotions to light makes it so believable, not just to me as an adult, but to a kid. As a kid watching it, a kid would understand absolutely what these emotions are. It's a very fun look at what goes on inside a person's head in terms of imagination. Again, giving embodiment to imaginary friends. Everybody remembers poor Bing Bong. If you don't remember Bing Bong is the most lovable and tragic character I think has ever been in a Pixar movie. If you haven't seen any of these movies, I'm trying really hard not to spoil them. If you haven't seen them, you're a fool, and I would highly recommend you get on top of that as soon as possible. So yes, I won't say what goes on with Bing Bong in Inside Out, except clearly he is an imaginary friend that interacts with these emotions, helps them on their journey. Essentially, joy and sadness get separated from the control room that is controlling this little girl's emotional output to the rest of the world, obviously leaving anger and fear in control. Again, good reflection of how puberty and being in bad situations can make other emotions stronger than the others. This was a movie where I think for the very first time I was not afraid to cry watching it. I had high amount of tears watching this, and I think it's because if someone suffers from emotional issues, which I think most of us do, there are times where we feel very sad, other times where we feel very angry, very scared. It's hard to control those emotions, and it's good in the movie that they show that other people don't understand why you're feeling those emotions, so their response is not to judge you, but to not understand exactly what you're going through. And we can all relate with that, absolutely. I think it's great that for kids' movies that they tackle these issues early to help children get through these difficult points in their entire life without getting too overwhelmed. And of course, you've got the same Pixar humor, so it's not too depressing. I know I focused a lot on the sadness in Inside Out, but it is very funny, especially when anger is angry, and very vibrant, fun movie, cool colors, good animation, good story. This is one of the few where I agree with the Academy that this was a great Pixar movie above other Pixar films. Perhaps not as high on the list as you would expect, but again, like Toy Story, Inside Out is just such a treasure of a film that it's got to be number 8. Number 7, a Pixar film that came out quite recently, and I only watched it quite recently, so I won't sit here and pretend that I've loved this movie since I was a young person. That is Coco. Now, I've had discussions with people, and not a lot of people have seen Coco, and I wonder if it is because it got buried amongst all the sequels that Pixar has done recently. There's a very small point where it was between Finding Dory, Cars 3, and Incredibles 2 and Toy Story 4. Coco is incredible in terms of the theme of the Day of the Dead story that it's going on in the movie. I will say that Coco is a very strange title for this movie in certain aspects. The character of Coco is important to the story, but Coco is not what the movie's about. The movie is about a young kid that wants to be a musician, but due to an incident way back down in his family line, music is banned in his family. He's not allowed to do it. For a series of events, he ends up in the land of the dead, where he interacts with other people, other old family members, and basically all he wants to do is wants to find a way that he can go back to the land of the living, but also be able to play music when he gets back there. I think what's really great about Coco is how accurate it is to the religion and the themes and the views of this culture. I think it's the most culturally correct movie I've seen in quite some time for animation and for children as well. It's very informative. I learnt a lot. I know I'm getting a lot of the terms wrong, but I have no good braino, so again, apologies. The music is sensational. There's a song in here called Remember Me, which happens 3 times in the movie. So you'd think a song played 3 times might get old, but the way the song is portrayed is very different in each time, which brings in a whole new emotion for that song and what its meaning is to the situation that it's occurring to, which is very impressive for a song. So hats off to the people who wrote this for Coco. The colors, again, animation for Pixar, top notch. I think you'll find with every entry I'll say, the colors are great and the animation is great. Well, it's true. So there you go. And it has a really cool twist-ish story thing. What's great about Pixar films is a lot of the time the story is not straightforward. You can kind of guess maybe where the film's going to go, but odds are there'll be some point where the story pivots in a way you weren't expecting. With Coco, the movie completely pivoted in a way I did not expect it to. I thought I had worked out characters and motivations, and there's a good twist involving the young boy's companion in the land of the dead and what his relationship is to that world, which is very impressive. And also, kind of like Cars 3 and Inside Out with some serious themes, there's some repercussions for people in this other world if people forget about them in the living world, which is quite dark, which makes the stakes that much higher for this movie. And again, the emotions are intense. When there's sadness going on, when people are getting old, when people are losing their dreams, it's very, very sad in horrible ways. I'm getting emotional just thinking about it, especially with the character of Coco herself. Coco is an example of Pixar using an original idea and making something truly cherished, which is another reason why I'm very glad that Onward and Soul are coming out this year. As much as I love the sequels, because they're all sequels to Pixar movies that I cherish dearly, when Pixar decides to do an original film, 9 times out of 10, it is one of the greatest films I've ever seen. They bring out such different stories with different themes and different messages, different emotions. Coco showed that Pixar still has it, and that's why it deserves to be on this list for number 7. Number 6, Toy Story 3. Come on, guys. Toy Story 3's got to be on this list. Everybody loves Toy Story 3. Toy Story 3 in 2010 shook the world to its core. Whether you were a young adult who had seen Toy Story when you were a child watching it in 2010, or whether you were a parent who had watched the original Toy Story with their child and then were watching it again, maybe not with your child. I like to think maybe families went together, but maybe you just caught it separately. But Toy Story 3 is the perfect example of a film that knows the audience that they started with and where that audience is in time when they make their new film. Essentially, Toy Story 3, Andy, the lovable owner of Woody, Buzz and Co., has got old, so he's not really cherishing his toys anymore, and it looks like they're about to be donated. The main message of this film is basically to move on and that it's okay. For parents, it's to let go of their child, or for Woody, it's to let go of Andy. Again, it's got the classic Toy Story humor, so it's never too depressing. There is a lot of laughter and fun to be had, but it is difficult to watch Woody desperately trying to keep hold of Andy and also his toys friends. It's hard seeing the other toys think that they have run their course and that they have no purpose anymore. We get some interesting new characters that are very emotionally fractured, specifically Lotso the bear, voiced by Ned Beatty, who I adore Ned Beatty. I haven't seen him in as much movies as I'd like to, but he's a great actor, and he is a sensational voice as Lotso. And of course, there's that scene in Toy Story 3 involving toys holding hand in a furnace. Again, don't want to spoil the movie for you, but you can get an idea of what that means. I watched this movie and I honestly thought that it was going to be the darkest, saddest ending to a Pixar film I had ever seen, but with the themes and emotions that the movie was portraying for us, I would have been okay with it in a devastating way. I would have cried myself to sleep for weeks, but it would have fit the path that these characters were on. Toy Story 3 showed that while some of these sequels are being made simply for consumer demand or for money, Pixar takes the time to put in a good idea for Toy Story 3 and deliver top-notch. Everybody knows the story of the mystical Toy Story 3 that was supposed to come out a couple years after Toy Story 2. Something about Buzz being recalled, I think, another adventure. But the script didn't work, and they didn't make it. Well done, Pixar. Thank you for not doing something that you know won't be as good as you could do it. Thank you for stepping back for 10 years to deliver something as fantastic as Toy Story 3. Number 6. Number 5. You know how much I love superheroes, so here it is, The Incredibles. The Incredibles is pure fun Pixar. It was a superhero film before superheroes became as big as they are in the mainstream media. When Incredibles came out, I think there'd been a couple Spider-Man films, assorted Superman films, but it wasn't the dominating box office giant that it is. And what's great about The Incredibles is it is an original idea. The Incredibles as a superhero family, the parents who had been superheroes in the past and retired to raise a family, and then their kids who have powers. They're not based on any comic. They didn't have their own comic before being pulled to screen. Yes, the elements of their powers you can see are pulled from comic characters, but it's more of a homage. They're not pretending that the Incredibles are the Fantastic Four or the X-Men. Pixar's animation works perfectly with the superpowers that we get to see, whether it's elastic stretching, ice powers, force fields, the whole shebang. It is an interesting world. I really wish I could live in the world of the Incredibles, whether it's the superheroes living in everyday life, the strange 1930s aesthetic that you get with the police officers and the FBI agents and all that stuff. What makes The Incredibles great, obviously, is the humor. The humor, I think, is the most of these films for me, mainly for my favorite characters, Edna Mode, who designs the outfits for The Incredibles, and her snarky, strange attitude, and of course Frozone, Samuel L. Jackson, and his world-famous "Honey, where is my supersuit?" montage. That is one of my favorite things I ever saw. I laugh non-stop every time I think about it. Thanks to memes, it'll never die. The Incredibles is very good for family values. It shows how a family can come together to accomplish the odds, and it shows as well that you need to be nice to people or else they'll become supervillains that want to kill you later on. It's a fun movie. It took a long time for a sequel to come out. Personally, I don't think it needed one, but when the sequel came out, I was pushing kids aside to get through, because The Incredibles, love it for a superhero movie, love it for a Pixar movie, love it for a movie in general. Number 5. We're getting into our top 4, and I know I'm pissing people off, but we're just going to keep powering right through. I apologize, but also I don't. Number 4 is Finding Nemo. Finding Nemo was a fun experience for me as a kid going to see it, because what's also great about Pixar advertising is they're very vague in what their movies are about. A lot of their trailers are very simple with what they're doing. If it's The Incredibles, it might be a shot of Frozone, but no actual shot of The Incredibles. If it's Inside Out, it's the emotion anger, but no other emotion. With Finding Nemo, the only thing I'd ever seen was a bunch of pelicans. So I went into this movie thinking Nemo was a pelican, and I was wrong. Finding Nemo is about Nemo, the little clownfish, and his father Marlin. They're separated. Marlin has to go find Nemo. Pretty simple. But what a movie. It looks great for the underwater world that they show. The characters that they introduce to us are all so vibrant with their personalities, and they are all funny. I don't think there's a character in Finding Nemo that I do not like. You've got Marlin and his sidekick Dory, the forgetful fish. You've got the sharks that are vegetarians. You've got the Cowabunga turtles. Willem Dafoe's Tank Gang. Jeffrey Rush the pelican. All great. I think what makes Finding Nemo special for me is because I am from Australia, and Finding Nemo is set around the Great Barrier Reef. So it's cool to see things in a movie that you see in everyday life, whether it's the Sydney Harbour Bridge, the Opera House, the Bateman's Bay and the Coral Reef, the types of fish that you do see around here. Not often. I'm not going to say I go and dip my face in the ocean so I see these fish all the time, but I've been to aquariums, and being Australian aquariums, those are the fish you generally see. It is a lovely film. It is dark when it wants to be, specifically Nemo's origin, but it always elevates that darkness with just constant comedy. There are so many quotable lines in Finding Nemo. Just keep swimming. P. Sherman, 42 Wallaby Way, Sydney. I am a nice shark, not a mindless eating machine. It's just great. I have so much Finding Nemo merchandise because I loved this film so much. I've got the little fishy toys. I have old PlayStation 2 games for Finding Nemo. As a kid, I loved it. As a kid, I rewatched it over and over again. And as an adult, I still do it because it is such a lovely, lovely film. Finding Nemo, number 4. Coming in at number 3, one of the earlier films, one that hasn't got a sequel yet. I don't know if it ever needs one. It probably doesn't, because this is just such a perfect film. A Bug's Life. A Bug's Life, again, is just taking a simple concept of bugs and wondering what makes them tick. How do they go about their lives? What stories can we pull from there? Apparently you get a really cool David versus Goliath story with ants against grasshoppers. The concept of A Bug's Life is simple. You've got the oppressed ants who are working for the asshole grasshoppers. Unfortunately, the main grasshopper is voiced by Kevin Spacey. I feel like Kevin Spacey has tainted a lot of what he's been in, but it's voice acting, so let's just pretend it's not Kevin Spacey, but his brother, who sounds just a little bit like him and is not a terrible, terrible human being. Flick, the main ant, has to protect his friends, his family, so he goes looking and finds warrior bugs, really a traveling circus. A Bug's Life is very funny, and it has such a good coming together story. I love movies like Guardians of the Galaxy, where you get a bunch of misfits that don't really get along, and they come together to save the day. The circus are a bunch of people that I don't think would hang out with each other if they weren't put in the situation that they are, whether it's Dennis Leary's male ladybug, David Hyde Pierce's pissed off stickman, or the caterpillar that wants to be a beautiful butterfly. Either way, them overcoming their fear and their selfishness to help Flick fight off the grasshoppers is just great. The animation is interesting here because it's stepped up from Toy Story, but it's still kind of the scary Frankensteininess that you get looking back on old films compared to new Pixar films. What I'm leading to, of course, is the bird. The bird is the most terrifying thing I've ever seen in my life, and the end result with the bird and its children and bugs it gave me nightmares as a kid. Now I cherish it as I guess it's a strange sort of experience. When you're traumatized, sometimes you look back on it fondly. I look back on the bird and its actions in this movie fondly, I guess. Maybe I'm traumatized, so I don't understand what emotions are anymore. But what a cool, dark twist for a kid's movie. Well done, Pixar. You don't shy away from your comeuppance. That's for sure. What's great about A Bug's Life is its references and jokes that are right in front of your face, but unless you're paying attention, you don't get it. What I mean specifically is these bugs have made homes and cities out of trash. You see bugs hanging out in a keg, but in the Bugs world, it's a bar. Old popcorn boxes are made into trucks. You've got certain types of bugs act as horses in this scenario. Raindrops from the sky, which for us are nothing, are life and death to these bugs. Incredible. A Bug's Life, I don't know if people forget about it. I hope they don't. Obviously, with all the sequels and things, I did hear someone say recently, like, oh, they've done all sequels to all Pixar movies now. All the good ones anyway, we can now move on. Absolutely not. A Bug's Life showed not only that Pixar can take an idea that no one has thought about doing and run with it. I don't want to talk about that other movie, Ants. That's just a coincidence. That's nothing. Moving on. Pixar is completely original. They never stole any of their ideas. But they showed that they are willing to improve their animation with each film that they progressed with, that they can do something different. I mean, toys, bugs, completely different. The story in Toy Story is completely different to the story in A Bug's Life, and create vibrant characters that are completely relevant to the world that they're in. A Bug's Life is, again, cherished to me because of my status as a child watching it. I love it with all my heart. Number 3. Now, number 1 and number 2 are interchangeable for me. I've been sitting here for days trying to decide which one I was going to put number 1 and which one's going to put number 2. In the end, it's not so much that I flipped a coin, more than I thought back on which one I had watched more, which one I could remember more about, which one made me laugh more. Number 1 just edges ahead of number 2. But I mean, take what you will. If you knocked me over the head and said you have to put number 2 as number 1, wouldn't be a huge deal. Anyway, number 2 is Monsters, Inc. Monsters, Inc. is such a cool movie because it's such a cool world that they created with these monsters. The concept of Mike and Sully working at the scare factory, come through the closet and scare children to harvest their scream for power. Incredible. The factory that they're working in, Monstropolis, the way these monsters go about. Obviously, monsters are different in terms of size and shape and things that they do, but they all interact together in such a simple world that watching Monsters, Inc., it seems normal. So when a human kid comes through and starts interacting with them, the kid is the one that seems out of place. The way the monsters overreact to it is funny to us because obviously we believe we're not poisonous to monsters, but we don't know. We don't understand. Anyway, that kid, Boo, is probably the most adorable thing you've ever seen on the movie screen. The way it says kitty and runs around after Sully is just adorable. But this movie for me clinches number 2 mainly for Mike Wazowski. Billy Crystal brings Mike Wazowski to life in such a way that I still quote him to this day, whether it's him talking about using spoons to dig out of Monstropolis, whether he's talking about his play that they're putting on, Put That Thing Back Where I Came From, Also Help Me. His overreaction to everything that's going on is so hilarious, and at my age, so relatable. I'm not good in stressful situations. I think I would react the same way to something that Mike does. He could be my spirit animal, I'm not sure. The twists and turns in this movie are great. The comedy is top notch. We've got some great characters besides Mike, of course, lovable Sully. Great film, great music, very jazzy music for Monsters, Inc. The opening where they're doing the cartoon doors, great stuff. And for a movie to commit for their whole end with the actual musical that was just a throwaway gag later in the movie with song and dance numbers, shows how self-aware Pixar is, how they're absolutely ready to run with a joke to a certain point without overdoing it. Monsters, Inc. is an incredible film, incredible concept, and I love it. Monsters, Inc. Number 2. Alright, before we announce number 1, I would do my honorable mentions. Normally I do about 12 of them, but there are not enough Pixar films to fill that slot, so as honorable mentions, let's just mention all the other Pixar films that didn't make the list. Not because they're bad, but because there are only 10 spots. Cars, as I said, great for what it was, knew what it was. Ratatouille, a rat that wants to be a chef. Simple concept, but great emotion. WALL-E, I'm going to be honest, WALL-E and me have had a rough history. I certainly did not like him when the film came out, but WALL-E has grown on me, and the visuals in this movie, space, earth, concepts, has certainly elevated it, for sure. I respect you, WALL-E. Up could have been up on number 10, if not for all the cherished kids films that I watched. Up should be up there alone for that emotional sucker punch of a start to the film. Otherwise, it is just a great comedy, grumpy man, crazy kid team-up film. Cars 2, look, it's cars that are spies. You can complain about it, but honestly, what's not to love? Brave, very cool Scottish world with Scottish characters and killer bears. Monsters University, how Mike and Sully met. Seeing those monsters go for university is complete riot. The Good Dinosaur, the black sheep of Pixar, I think it's good. It's certainly very interesting, it's a very unique film, and it's worth checking out for sure. What if dinosaurs were still alive? How would they be with humans? I don't know, watch The Good Dinosaur and find out. Finding Dory, not as great as Nemo, but as I said, I love Dory, and that world that the fishies live in, always a treat to see. Incredibles 2, we waited a long time for it, we got it didn't disappoint. Very cool story. Animation had stepped up top notch since the first Incredibles. And Toy Story 4. And look, if you're a regular listener to my podcast, you know that Toy Story 4 was in my top 10 movies of 2019. The fact that it's not on the list for top 10 Pixar films just shows to you the quality of Pixar films and how bloody hard it was to make this list. Alright, number 1. If you know all the Pixar films, you can work it out in your head what it was. But if you haven't, drum roll, metaphorically speaking, Toy Story 2. I love Toy Story 2. Toy Story 2 is my favorite Pixar film because I love the idea of the toys going on an adventure. Toy Story, what I loved originally was all the extra characters, Ham, Slinky, Rex, Mr. Potato Head. So Toy Story 2, they took the concept of venturing out into the real world, but the fact that they got to bring all those characters along, I love. I love a quest. That's why I love the Lord of the Rings movies. I love each of those characters, seeing them out there in the real world, trying not to die. Great stuff. Also, you got extra characters introduced to interact with Woody. Basically, the plot of the story, Woody ends up with people from his past, well, from his character's persona's past, and it's a dilemma about whether he's going to stay with them or go back home. Jessie the cowgirl and Bullseye the horse, lovable characters. I love Stinky Pete the prospector as well because I love Kelsey Grammer's voice, Sideshow Bob. Anything he's in with that voice elevates it completely. Expanding on the Toy Story world in terms of the Buzz Lightyear characters, the Woody characters, bringing in Barbie, Emperor Zurg, and playing up that whole Star Wars concept. Fantastic stuff. And then the ending is such a nail-biting sequence because you don't know if Woody's going to successfully do what he wants to do one way or another because all the hurdles get in the way. It just does not stop with the things that these toys have to jump through to get to their end goal at the end of the day. Every Saturday morning, I think I popped that on. Pure escapism. The movie makes me happy every time I watch it. But the high point of the movie is the friendship between Woody and Buzz. They're antagonistic in the first one. Toy Story 2 shows how solid they've become as friends and how far they're willing to go for each other. I love movies like that. I love movies for friendship. I think friendship is one of the most important things in the world. and showing how bitter enemies can become the best of friends, and then taking it and running with it. Great stuff. Toy Story 2, yeah, sure, maybe I've angered a lot of you. Maybe you don't think it's as good as Toy Story 3 or Toy Story 1, but Toy Story 2, I can still see it in my head, that video cassette sitting on my TV, worn out because I've opened and watched it so many times. It is completely cherished to me, in my opinion, the best Pixar film. Alright, and we are going to wrap it up there because this has been a long episode. We've covered a lot of Pixar films, a lot of ground. I hope you've enjoyed. I'm pretty confident in my list. I'm pretty sure I explained to you why I like them. I think the main point you can take away from this list is that I love all Pixar, and I'm very excited to get more Pixar this year. Tune in later in the year. I'll be reviewing them, and I'll be letting you know how much I love them, probably. Thank you very much. I'll be back in a couple of days. I'm off to see Birds of Prey on Thursday. Margot Robbie reprises Harley Quinn. First step in the DCEU sort of moving away from their whole game plan that crashed and burned. But I hear good things. I hear people are excited about this movie, and I am excited to check it out. So tune back in for that review, and I'll let you know if it's worth seeing. Otherwise, thank you very much for listening. I love and appreciate every single one of you. As always, you've been spliced in later. Adios, muchachos. I'll catch you next time.